Rain Michaels had exactly one job that night: deliver the flowers, get the invoice signed, go home to her cat. 3 things. She had done it 100 times before at 100 different events. It was supposed to be the easiest money she had made all month. She never made it home. This is the story of a 22-year-old florist from Atlanta who drove her van to the wrong address at the wrong time and walked into a night that would change every single thing about her life. A night that began with white orchids and ended with a wedding ring on her finger that belonged to someone else's story. The Kwan estate was not the kind of place Rain had ever been before. It was all marble and money, and the kind of quiet that expensive things have. The quiet that says everything in here costs more than you will ever earn. She had walked through those gates with her flowers and her scissors and her clipboard, thinking about nothing except getting the job done and getting home before midnight. She was finishing the last arrangement when it happened. Not a knock, not a warning, just doors slamming open and voices flooding in, and a world tilting completely off its axis in the space of 60 seconds. And then she was standing at the end of an aisle in a dress that did not fit her, holding a bouquet she had arranged with her own hands for a completely different woman, staring at a man she had never seen before in her life. A man who looked back at her with eyes that saw everything and gave away nothing. A man who, 30 seconds later, would become her husband. Soo-Hyun Kwan had survived assassinations. He had survived betrayals that would have broken most men before 30. He had never once in 15 years been caught off guard. Until Rain Michaels walked through his ballroom doors. And somewhere in that room, the man who had planned all of it was watching and smiling. Before we go any further, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is only getting started, and you do not want to miss a single second of what comes next. Rain had been awake since 5 that morning. It was not nerves. Rain did not really do nerves. She had grown up in a household where her mother ran a catering business out of a kitchen that was always too hot and always too loud. And she had learned early that panic was a luxury you could not afford when there was work to be done. What kept her up was the order itself. 47 individual arrangements. White orchids, ivory roses, trailing eucalyptus, all of it needing to be loaded, transported, and installed without a single bruised petal. She had built rainfall blooms from scratch at 19 years old with a business loan her mother had co-signed and a van she had bought second-hand from a man who smelled like cigarettes and spoke mostly in grunts. 3 years later, the shop was not making her rich, but it was making her living, and Rain treated every contract like it was the one that would either save her or sink her. Because sometimes it was. The call from the Kwan estate had come 2 days before. Their contracted florist had canceled. Some kind of emergency, the coordinator had said, her voice stretched thin with stress. Could Rain cover it? Double the normal rate. Rain had said yes before the woman finished the sentence. She arrived at the estate at 4 in the afternoon and spent the next 3 hours working. The staff were professional and polite and completely absorbed in the machinery of an event this size. Nobody paid much attention to the florist moving quietly from room to room with her crates. She was background. She was used to being in the background. She was in the bridal suite finishing the last of the table arrangements when the energy in the building changed. She felt it before she heard it, a shift in the air, footsteps that were too fast, voices that were too sharp. And then the doors of the suite burst open, and 3 women came flooding in speaking Korean so fast and so overlapping that Rain could only catch fragments. Gone, the car, her phone, nobody knows. She set down her clippers and took a step back toward the wall. This was not her situation. She was a florist. She needed her paperwork signed and she needed to leave. But then a man in a dark suit filled the doorway. He looked at the room and then he looked at Rain. Really looked. The kind of look that measured things. "Who are you?" he asked. "Rain Michaels. I did the flowers. I was just about to leave." His eyes went to her dress. She always wore white to events, a clean shift dress that was professional without being formal. She had worn it so many times she had stopped thinking about it. She started thinking about it now, because the way he was looking at her white dress was the same way the three women were looking at it, like it was a solution to a problem she did not know existed. Before she could protest, before she could even fully understand what was happening, there were hands on her shoulders guiding her toward the corridor, a veil being pressed into her hands, someone's lipstick being swept across her mouth, and a voice hissing in her ear. 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Stand at the front and hold the bouquet. The real bride is on her way. The real bride was not on her way. Rain walked into the ballroom. The doors closed behind her. 300 people rose to their feet, and the man standing at the end of the aisle looked at her with those unreadable eyes, and Rain understood, with a cold clarity that moved through her like water, that something had gone very, very wrong. What she did not understand yet was that nothing about this night had happened by accident. Every piece had been placed, every detail had been arranged, and the person who had arranged them was sitting in that very room, watching it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. Soo-yeon knew before she reached the third pew. He had prepared for this wedding the way he prepared for everything, completely. He had reviewed photographs of Hana Yu until he could have described her from memory in the dark. The way she moved, the particular way she held her shoulders, the practiced composure of a woman who had been raised to occupy important rooms without ever looking like she was trying. The woman walking toward him now was none of those things. She walked like someone making a conscious decision with every step, like someone who was terrified and had decided that the only option available to her was to keep moving forward anyway. Her hands were wrapped around the bouquet too tightly. The veil was slightly crooked, and the dress, Hana's dress, he recognized it, did not fit quite right across the shoulders. This was not Hana Yu. Soo-yeon had 300 people watching him and a room full of the most dangerous and calculating individuals in the city's underground sitting in those chairs. Every one of them had come tonight not just for the wedding, but to take the temperature of his empire, to see how he stood, to look for cracks. He stood still. He had learned a long time ago that stillness was its own form of power, that the man who reacted first was the man who lost first. So he stood at that altar and he watched the wrong woman walk toward him, and he kept his face exactly where he always kept it, completely unreadable. She reached him. The veil was lifted, and Soo-yeon looked at her face for the first time properly. She was not performing. That was the first thing he noticed. In a room where almost everyone was performing something, composure, joy, appropriate emotion for the occasion, this woman's face was entirely unguarded. Her eyes were doing a remarkable job of holding panic at bay, and almost no job at all of hiding the intelligence running beneath it. She was terrified. She was also trying very hard to figure out what was happening and what she was supposed to do about it. He almost respected it. The officiant began to speak, the traditional words. Soo-yeon had heard them at other people's weddings and had always considered them the least interesting part of the event. Right now, they were buying him time to think. He made his decision before the officiant was halfway through. He would complete the ceremony. He would not give whoever had engineered this the satisfaction of a visible reaction. He would find out what had happened to Hana Yu, identify the architect of this switch, and respond in the way he always responded to people who moved against him, methodically, completely, without mercy. But first, he would say the words. He said them. He heard the woman beside him say them back in a voice that was soft and slightly unsteady, but did not break. He heard the officiant pronounce them married. He turned to face her. She looked up at him, and in a room full of calculated people, she said the only uncalculated thing anyone had said all evening. "I'm so sorry," she breathed, so quietly only he could hear. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know any of this was going to happen." Soo-yeon looked at her for a long moment. He believed her, and that surprised him more than anything else that had happened tonight. The reception began around them, but inside Soo-yeon's mind, something else had already begun, a hunt that would not stop until he found every person responsible for what had just happened in this room. They brought her to a room that was bigger than her apartment. Not a cell, not something cold or threatening. A room with floor-length curtains in cream silk and a window that looked over a private garden lit softly from below. A bathroom with a soaking tub and towels folded so precisely they looked like architecture. A bed so large and so perfectly made that Rain stood at the edge of it for a full minute just staring. Under different circumstances, it would have been the most beautiful room she had ever slept in. Under these circumstances, it felt like the world's most expensive trap. She sat on the edge of the bed in clothes that Mrs. O had brought her, soft, well-fitted things that were clearly expensive and clearly not purchased for her specifically, which meant someone in this house kept a supply of guest clothing for situations like this one, which raised a whole separate set of questions she was not ready to ask. She pressed her hands against her knees and tried to think clearly. She had come to deliver flowers. She was now legally married to a man whose name made people's voices drop when they said it. She, Rain Michaels, from Atlanta, cat owner, small business operator, woman who had once spent 40 minutes crying over a dead succulent, had stood at an altar and said "I do" to a complete stranger, in front of 300 people, on camera. It was almost certainly already on the internet. Her mother was going to lose her mind. The door opened without a knock. Soo-yeon came in and sat in the chair across from the bed. He had changed out of the wedding suit, dark pants, a simple shirt, nothing that should have been intimidating, and yet everything about him was. He sat the way he stood, with a stillness that felt less like calm and more like a very controlled storm. He looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning. Leave nothing out." So Rain told him. She told him about the phone call and the double rate and her van full of orchids. She told him about the white dress she wore to every event. She told him about the suite doors bursting open and the panicked women and the veil pressed into her hands and the voice telling her 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. She told him all of it without softening any part of it, because something about the way he listened, completely still, completely present, not interrupting once, told her that this was a man who would know immediately if she shaped the truth to make herself look better. When she finished, he was quiet. "You had no idea who I was," he said. "I still barely know who you are," Rain said. "I know your name. I know what it means when people say it a certain way. That's all I've got right now." Something shifted at the very edge of his expression. Not a smile, just the faintest loosening of something that had been pulled very tight. "That," he said quietly, "is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years." And for just a moment, in a room full of silk curtains and expensive silence, something passed between them that felt less like hostility and more like the beginning of something neither of them had a name for yet. If you are enjoying this story, take a second right now to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think of Rain so far. Stories like this, ordinary people pulled into extraordinary worlds, happen more often than you would believe. Stay with me, because this is only the beginning. Director Beck arrived at the estate just before midnight. Soo-hyun was in his study when the knock came, one knock, precisely, which was Baek's way of announcing himself. For 7 years, Soo-hyun had trusted this man with things that could not be trusted to anyone else. In 7 years, he had never seen Baek look the way he looked walking through that door tonight, like a man who had done the math and did not like the answer. "Report," Soo-hyun said. Baek placed a folder on the desk and stepped back. "We found Hana Yu." Soo-hyun looked up. "She is safe, unharmed. She is currently at a private hotel on the east side of the city. She left the estate voluntarily, approximately 40 minutes before the ceremony began. Voluntarily. She left with a man, a member of Chairman Yu's personal staff. Our intelligence suggests the marriage arrangement was never made with her consent. She had been planning her exit for several weeks." Soo-hyun set down the pen he had been holding. He absorbed this the way he absorbed everything difficult, by setting it in its proper place before he responded to it. "The substitution," he said. Baek opened the folder, surveillance photographs, time-stamped, a series of images showing Rain's white van arriving at the estate, a figure in a white dress moving through the service entrance, a gap of 12 minutes between her arrival in the bridal suite and the moment she walked into the ballroom. "Chairman Yu orchestrated it directly," Baek said. "His people identified the florist during the setup hours, her dress, her build, her height, close enough to pass in the chaos of a missing bride. They planted a fabricated briefing with the event staff. The women who prepared her believed they were following emergency protocol authorized from above." Soo-hyun looked at the photograph of Rain arriving with her van, ordinary, unhurried, having absolutely no idea. "He needed the ceremony to go ahead," Soo-hyun said. "Without it, the alliance dissolves, and he loses 3 council seats before the end of the quarter. He needed a marriage on record. He did not care about the details." Soo-hyun was quiet. He had played the long game against Chairman Yu for years. He had always respected the old man's patience, his willingness to wait, his ability to think 10 moves ahead while everyone else was still looking at the board. He had not anticipated this. This was not patience. This was recklessness wearing the mask of strategy. "He thought I would bury it, annul it quietly, move on before anyone looks too closely. He calculated that the embarrassment alone would be enough. The girl," Soo-hyun said it flatly. "He chose her specifically." Baek hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "She was identified as having no organizational ties, no influential family. No one is positioned to escalate or create complications. No one would come looking for her." The words sat in the room without being spoken. Soo-hyun heard them anyway. He thought about Rain Michaels sitting on the edge of that bed, telling him the truth when lying would have been easier. He thought about Chairman Yu looking at that same woman and seeing nothing but a piece that could be moved and discarded. Something cold and quiet moved through him that had nothing to do with strategy. "Put surveillance on Chairman Yu's offices by dawn, full coverage, and Baek," he paused. "The woman is not to be discussed outside this estate. She is a guest here. She is to be treated as one." Baek nodded and left. Soo-hyun sat alone in the study for a long time after the door closed. What Baek had not yet discovered, what no one in the estate knew, was that Chairman Yu had not finished playing his hand. Rain Michaels was not just a pawn he had already used. She was a pawn he was still holding. Rain woke up, and for 3 seconds she thought she was home. The light was wrong. The ceiling was too high. The sheets were too soft in a way that her sheets had never once been in the 3 years she had owned them. And then everything came back, and she lay very still and stared at that unfamiliar ceiling and let the events of the previous night settle back into their proper sequence. She had delivered flowers. She was married. She pressed her hands over her face and breathed. Biscuit, she thought. Her cat had been alone since yesterday afternoon, and Biscuit did not handle solitude with grace or dignity. He handled it by knocking things off surfaces. By the time she got home, he would have cleared the kitchen counter at minimum. He would have knocked her good mug onto the floor. He had done it before. Mrs. O arrived with breakfast on a tray at what turned out to be 8 in the morning. She set it down by the window, and Rain watched her move around the room with the comfortable efficiency of someone who had been making impossible situations feel manageable for a very long time. "Mrs. O," Rain said, "is he here?" Mrs. O pointed downward, then put a hand to her ear like a phone. "He's downstairs on calls." A nod, an expression that said, "And he has been since before you woke." Rain looked at the breakfast. It was beautiful. She had absolutely no appetite. She picked up a piece of toast and held it, and tried to figure out what her next move was. She needed to go home. She had orders to fill. She had a business to run. She had a cat staging a one-man protest movement in her kitchen. The door opened without a knock, and Soo-yeon walked in, and Rain was starting to think that knocking was simply a concept that did not apply to him in his own house. He sat down. He looked at her untouched breakfast and then at her face. "You want to leave," he said. "I have a cat and a business and a life," Rain said. "Yes." "Your shop is open. Someone is managing your morning orders." A pause. "Mrs. O has your key." Rain stared at him. "You went into my shop?" "We borrowed access to your shop. Your cat has been fed. Your 9 o'clock order has been prepared." He said it the way a person might mention they had watered a plant while someone was away. Completely proportionate, completely reasonable. "I need you to stay a few more days until I have managed the situation." "Managed the situation?" Rain repeated. "There are people who know about last night. If you go home before I have addressed what needs to be addressed, you become accessible to the wrong people before I can prevent it." Rain looked at him carefully. "What do the wrong people want with me?" He was quiet for a moment too long, and in that moment, Rain understood something she had been trying not to understand since she woke up. She was not just a mistake in someone else's story. She was not just an inconvenience to be resolved. She was leveraged, actively, right now, and the man sitting across from her was the only reason she was currently safe. That thought sat in her chest like a stone, and what came next was going to make that stone feel a great deal heavier. Ji-won arrived the way she apparently arrived everywhere, without warning and without apology. Rain was in the library when it happened. She had asked one of the guards if there was somewhere in the house she could sit that was not her bedroom, and he had looked mildly puzzled, as though guests wanting to move around freely was an unusual request, and eventually led her to a room lined floor to ceiling with books and given over to a window that looked out over the estate's east garden. She had found a chair and curled into it and was doing her level best to think through her situation when the door opened. The woman who walked in looked like Soo-yeon the way a lit match looks like a controlled fire. Same sharpness, completely different energy. She was in her late 20s, dressed like she had somewhere more important to be and had come here anyway because she wanted to. And she walked directly to the chair across from Rain and sat down and looked at her with eyes that were bright and assessing and not unkind. "You're the florist," she said. "I'm the florist," Rain agreed. "Ji-won, his sister. I want to hear the whole thing from you, not his version. His version is technically accurate and emotionally useless." Rain told it again, all of it. She was getting better at telling it. She watched Ji-won's face as she talked, the sharp attention, the small nods, the brief flash of something that looked a lot like anger when Rain described being guided into the veil before she had fully processed what was happening. When she finished, Ji-won sat with it for a moment. "He kept you here," she said. "He said it wasn't safe to leave yet. He opened your shop, fed your cat. Jiwon said this like she was reading items off a list that surprised her. He could have had this annulled by 9 this morning with 3 phone calls. He didn't. Rain had noticed that too. She hadn't known what to do with it. Did he seem angry? Jiwon asked. No, Rain said. He seemed like someone who had already decided what to do with the anger and put it somewhere else. Jiwon looked at her for a moment. Then she said, I'm going to tell you something he won't tell you himself. Rain waited. 3 years ago, I was supposed to get married. The man I was engaged to was a coward. He ended it publicly, in a way that made sure everyone in our world knew about it and drew their own conclusions. My brother was in Japan when it happened. By the time he came back, it was done, and the worst of it was already over. Jiwon's voice stayed steady. Her hands, Rain noticed, were very still in her lap. When he protects you, Jiwon said carefully, it is not a strategy. It is not him calculating what he gets out of it. It is Soo-yeon being unable to walk past someone who needs protection without doing something about it. He cannot help it. It is the most human thing about him, and he would be furious if you told him I said so. She stood and moved toward the door, paused with one hand on the frame. He is going to push you away, she said, not turning around. He does it to everyone. He decides people are safer at a distance, and he puts them there whether they want to be there or not. She glanced back. Her eyes were direct and warm and completely serious. Don't let him do that to you. The door closed. Rain sat in the library for a long time after that. And what Jiwon had not said, what she had found out an hour earlier and had not yet told even her brother, was about changing the danger level of Rain's situation in ways nobody had prepared for. It was left under the windshield wiper of Rain's van. Her van was parked in the estate's lower courtyard, exactly where she had left it 2 nights ago, surrounded by security cameras and a perimeter that was supposed to be impenetrable. Whoever had placed the photograph there had either found a gap in the coverage or had known exactly where the gaps were, and both of those possibilities meant something that Soo-yeon did not like at all. One of the security team found it at 6:15 in the morning and brought it straight to him. He opened it. A photograph of Rain's flower shop. Timestamp 5:47 a.m., before the shop had opened, before the person Rain had sent over had even arrived, taken from close enough to shoot through the front window. Through the glass, barely visible in the early morning interior, a shadow, someone inside. On the back, in handwriting that was calm and unhurried and completely unbothered, marriage is inconvenient. The inconvenience can be removed. Soo-yeon stood in the corridor outside Rain's room and held the photograph. He was not afraid. Fear had not been a significant part of his emotional vocabulary for a long time. But there was something else, something that moved through his chest at a specific frequency that he associated with the moments in his life when the threat was not to him, but to someone near him. Something that was sharper and more urgent than anything self-preservation had ever produced. He knocked on Rain's door. He knocked, which he was aware was not something he typically did, and waited. She opened it. She was already awake, already dressed, sitting with coffee and the expression of someone trying to maintain composure over a situation that kept getting larger. She took one look at his face and set down the coffee. What happened? It was not quite a question. He placed the photograph on the table between them. He watched her look at it. He watched her recognize her own shop front. He watched her read the timestamp and the handwriting, and he watched the color change in her face and then come back, slower and steadier than he expected. You, she said. Yes. He's telling you I'm a problem. He is telling me, Soo-yeon said, that the problem has a solution he controls. He expects me to choose the path of least resistance. Rain looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then she looked at him. "Are you going to?" He held her gaze. She was asking it the way she asked everything, directly, without armor, genuinely wanting the truth and prepared to deal with it, whatever it was. "No," he said. She nodded once, set the photograph face down on the table, and then she said the thing that changed the shape of everything that came next. "Then we need to figure out how to end this, you and me together, because I am not going to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, and I don't think you want that either." In 15 years of building something that most people feared, nobody had ever simply pulled up a chair and said, "Let's solve this together." He did not know what to do with that, but he was going to have to figure it out fast, because what Chairman Yu did next was going to force their hand in a way neither of them was ready for. Rain put paper on the table. Actual paper, a notepad she had found in the library, and a pen she had borrowed from Mrs. O, and she spread it out on the dining table and began to write and draw in the way she always did when she was working through something complicated. Lists, arrows, circles connected by lines. It was how she had planned rainfall blooms when it was still just an idea she was too stubborn to let go of. It was how she worked. Soo-hyun sat across from her and watched. She was aware of his watching. It was the kind of attention that other people would have found suffocating. Rain found it clarifying somehow. Like having an audience that was genuinely paying attention made her think more precisely. "Here is the problem," she said, tapping the paper. "Yu wants you to annul this marriage. He wants you to do it quietly and quickly and hope nobody notices. Because if the marriage just disappears, then his plan works. He disrupted your alliance, he embarrassed you, and he walks away clean." "Yes. But his whole leverage over you depends on this marriage being something you're ashamed of, something you want buried." She looked up. "What happens to his leverage if you're not ashamed of it?" Soo-hyun tilted his head. The gesture she had learned meant he was following something closely. "He built this on the assumption that a man like you would never willingly be connected to a woman like me," Rain said. She said it plainly, without bitterness. It was simply the calculation Yu had made, and they both knew it. He thought the embarrassment would do half his work for him. What if it doesn't embarrass you? "You are suggesting we present the marriage as intentional," Soo-hyun said. "I am suggesting we walk into whatever room has the most witnesses and act like this was always the plan." She met his eyes. "He can send all the photographs he wants. He can make all the implications he wants. But if we are standing in front of his entire network looking like two people who are exactly where they chose to be, what does he do with that?" Soo-hyun was quiet. She watched him run the logic. Watch him find the pressure points and test them. "There is a council dinner," he said finally. 4 nights from now. Every significant person in my world will be there, including Chairman Yu." He picked up her pen and drew a single deliberate line across her diagram. "Every one of them has been waiting to see how I respond to what happened at the wedding." "Then let's show them," Rain said. Ji-won, who had been sitting at the end of the table pretending to read something on her phone, put it down and looked at her brother. "I have said this once and I will say it again. I like her more than anyone you have ever brought into this house, and I want it noted that I said so before things got interesting." Soo-hyun ignored his sister with the fluency of someone who had been doing it for decades. He was looking at Rain, at the notepad with its circles and arrows, at the steadiness in her face. "You understand what you are agreeing to," he said. "This world is not—" "I know what I'm agreeing to," Rain said. "I agreed to it the second that photograph landed on my table." She picked up her pen. "I am a florist who has been accidentally married to a crime boss for 4 days, and I would like this to end with both of us intact. I am very motivated." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Barely there, dawn almost as soon as it arrived. but Rain saw it, and she filed it away carefully. What neither of them knew yet was that the council dinner was going to be more dangerous than either of them had planned for, because Chairman Yu had learned about the dinner too, and he was not coming empty-handed. The restaurant had no sign outside. The kind of place that did not need one. A building in the old quarter of the city, stone-faced and quiet, that had held private dinners for the last 40 years for people who did not appear on any public list and did not require a published address to know where they were going. Rain stood in the elevator on the way up and kept her breathing even. She was wearing deep green. Ji-won had selected it, and Rain had learned quickly that arguing with Ji-won about aesthetics was a battle that would take energy she needed for other things. Her hair was up. The dress fit. The earrings were perfect. She looked like someone who belonged in this room. She needed to feel like it too. If someone approaches you, Soo-yeon said beside her, let them speak first. Answer what is asked. Nothing extra. I know how to read a room, Rain said. You told me your cat's name within an hour of meeting me. Biscuit is an important context for understanding who I am as a person. You also described his temperament. He has a complex temperament. It seemed relevant. A pause, and then, so quiet she almost missed it, something that might have been the very beginning of a laugh, low and brief and immediately controlled, like a door opened and shut before anyone could see inside. Rain stored it somewhere carefully. The elevator opened. The room was everything she had steeled herself for, beautiful in the particular way that power makes things beautiful, effortlessly, expensively, as though beauty were simply the natural result of people with enough money occupying a space. Faces turned as they entered. She felt it. 300 eyes recalibrating. She was new. She was unknown. She was the woman from the wedding that every single person in this room had a theory about. Let them look. Soo-yeon brought her to the center of the room. Not a corner, not a wall. The center, where there was no question about whether they were there or why. He introduced her to 3 people in the first 10 minutes, by name, with a naturalness that left no crack for interpretation. Across the room, Chairman Yu stood silver-haired and composed and watched them with eyes that had been calculating odds for 50 years. Rain watched him register her, watched the small adjustment behind his eyes when he saw that she was not nervous, not hidden, not performing discomfort for an audience. She was standing in the middle of his world like she had been there before. Good. Let him recalculate. When Yu made his approach, it was smooth and unhurried, the movement of a man who owned every room he walked through. He greeted Soo-yeon with warmth that had no seams. Then he turned to Rain. She felt the full weight of that gaze, the appraisal, the expectation that she would fold slightly under it, give him something small to use. Rain looked him directly in the eyes and smiled with a warmth she had been preparing since the moment she saw that photograph of her flower shop. It's so good to finally meet you, she said. I understand your granddaughter Hana is traveling at the moment. I do hope she's getting everything she needs. 1 second. The right kind of second. The kind where a very old, very careful man understands something he had not factored into his calculations. The woman standing in front of him was not a pawn who did not know she was on a board. She was a woman who looked at the board, understood the game, and decided to play it. Chairman Yu smiled, the kind of smile that is made entirely of teeth. He is very well, he said. How thoughtful. He excused himself shortly after. On the drive home, the city unspooled outside the windows in long ribbons of light. Rain sat in the dark of the back seat and felt the shape of the evening settling around her. Soo-yeon sat beside her, and for a while neither of them spoke. That was well done, he said quietly. I just talked to an old man at a party. You reminded him that you are not what he thought you were. He paused. In this world, that is not a small thing. Rain looked out at the city. She thought about orchid arrangements and late nights in her shop and a van that smelled like eucalyptus. She thought about how far she was from all of that and how strange it was that she did not feel entirely lost. What happens now? She asked. Soo-Yun turned to look at her. In the passing light, his face was briefly, very unexpectedly open. Now, he said, we find out Chairman Yu did not survive the thing he had underestimated. Not the evidence that Soo-Yun's people assembled in the 3 weeks that followed, though that evidence was thorough enough to strip 3 council seats and a decade of influence in a single presentation. Not the political unraveling that came after, quiet and swift and engineered with the kind of precision that only someone very patient and very angry is capable of. What undid him was simpler than any of that. He had looked at Rain Michaels and seen nothing. A girl who delivered flowers, a body in a white dress, something to be moved and discarded. He had been wrong in the most complete way a person can be wrong. Rain kept the shop. She kept Biscuit, who had, in fact, knocked her favorite mug off the counter while she was gone and felt no remorse about it. She learned to move through a world that was nothing like her own, with the same methodical calm she had always brought to difficult arrangements, one piece at a time, until something beautiful emerged from what had looked like chaos. Soo-Yun learned something at 28 that most men in his position never learn at all, that the thing you cannot plan for is sometimes the thing that holds everything else together. He had not planned for Rain Michaels. Every day he was grateful she had shown up with her flowers and her white dress and her complete, accidental, life-changing honesty. Some stories begin with the wrong choice. This one began with the wrong bride, and it ended up being exactly right. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It genuinely helps more than you know. Drop a comment below and tell me what you thought of Rain and Soo-Yun. Did you see that ending coming? What would you have done in Rain's position? I read every single comment. See you in the next one.